Good morning, everybody. I'm Daniel Rosenwasser. I'm a program manager on the Typescript team. And today I'm here to talk about TypeScript and Angular and how the two are better together. Now, I want us to face this reality, this fact. Big JavaScript apps are hard. And it's not even just big JavaScript apps, it's small and medium-sized apps that slowly grow over time and accumulate more and more. And after a while, they become what we like to consider a read-only code base, right? You need to fix something, you need to maintain, and so you start like prodding and poking, and you're not really sure where to start. And then you don't even feel comfortable changing things because, who knows what you might break. So it becomes read-only. And this is something that we ran into a lot at Microsoft, actually. It's a big company. We're building a lot of JavaScript code. And so even Visual Studio Code, the editor that we've released in the last year, used to be fully a JavaScript app, fully built in that. And after a certain point, the complexity got to be a little bit too much. It became hard to maintain. And we knew that this was not a unique problem to people, right? For the most part, other companies were starting to see this as well. Server-side JavaScript was becoming a thing at the time because, Node had popped up. And then if you just looked at the sheer complexity of apps that were growing on the internet, it was getting hairier and hairier, hard to maintain. And so we said, JavaScript on its own is not enough to make these hairy apps. It's just getting to be difficult. And we love JavaScript. It's very expressive. It allows us to create these apps that are, just get something up and running really quickly, and it's really powerful. But the thing is that we knew that we'd had experience in other languages making more complex apps, and we found ourselves missing things like modules to help us structure applications, classes and types to help establish contracts and behaviors between different parts of our program. And some of this stuff was coming with future versions of JavaScript like ES 2015, ES6, but it's not like you have an ES6 engine just running everywhere, right? People are targeting IE8, which runs ECMAScript 3, and this is like just something, a part of JavaScript development. You're not always targeting the newest platform. At the same time, we just knew we needed types to help us with tooling because JavaScript tooling was not necessarily at the best place. So we said, let's take this language that we actually we like building apps in, add the things that we're missing, so future JavaScript features, as well as types and tooling to help us make JavaScript apps faster. And that's how we ended up with TypeScript. And TypeScript is an open source, cross-platform superset of JavaScript. So if you have any JavaScript that is valid today, you plug it into the TypeScript compiler, and it'll transpile it and give you clean, readable output. And we also have source maps to help you debug if you'd like, but many teams have told us, hey, we don't even need the source maps. We just debug the JavaScript straight. Now, in late 2014, the Angular team announced something called attscript, and they had come to some of the same conclusions that we had, namely that JavaScript apps were hard to write, and that we needed a little bit more. We needed tooling, we needed a couple of extra things. And they looked at TypeScript as well, and they said, well, TypeScript is not enough necessarily. So a lot of members of the community in both communities said, well, why aren't you guys just working together? And we asked ourselves, well, why aren't we all just working together? So we reached out and we said, well, what is it going to take for TypeScript to become the tool of choice for the next generation of Angular? And among many things, we knew that we needed to buff up our ES6 support. Angular 2 really looks forward to the future, and so we needed to embrace that as well. And so we actually gave it a lot of attention, just put our foot to the pedal, and pushed our support for that, sped up the work on it. Then we implemented decorators to give you the nice dependency injection features that you get in Angular 2 today. And finally, we added support for System.js, and so now you can use System.js with TypeScript, and you get a lot of nice features from that. Now, apart from that, we also knew that tooling was something that we were always touting, but we were really focusing on Windows and Visual Studio. But Angular developers don't necessarily only work on Windows and Visual Studio. They work on Mac, they work on Linux, you work on Sublime, you work on different editors like Vim and Emacs, and it's a very diverse bunch. And so we really decided, okay, let's try to focus on, just for now, Sublime and every platform. And so we created an officially supported Sublime text plugin for TypeScript. And with that, we took the core of that and we created something called TS Server. And so now, as long as your editor has a plugin model, it can support TypeScript. And so the end result is that we're on your favorite editor, basically. We're on Sublime Text, Visual Studio, VS Code, Eclipse, Emacs, Vim, Atom, WebStorm. Basically, if you have a favorite platform and a favorite editor, we're probably there. So I think we would have gotten to this point eventually, but I don't think we would have gotten there as soon had it not been for our work with the Angular team and community. By understanding just the needs and everything that you guys were looking for, we were able to make ourselves a better language. So we want to thank you all. We want to thank the Angular team for embracing us as part of the Angular community. So thank you very much. Now, I don't want to get this too mushy because sometimes that happens, so I'm going to launch into demo mode. And so, if we can get this going, I'm going to open up a really basic code sample in JavaScript. And so, is this, should I unplug, replug? Windows P. Windows key P, if you weren't aware. That's the magic thing. OK, so here's a short code, a little bit of code in JavaScript. And I want you to take a quick look at it. And there's a couple of bugs. I'm just going to be frank with you. And if you found them, great. If you haven't found them, I just want to point out you would probably not find them in code review. These things slip by. So I'm just going to rename this to a .ts file. So let's rename it. Let's rename that. That's where that is. Shipping.ts. Great. OK. And off the bat, you see these little red squigglies. And if you're familiar with Microsoft Word, red squigglies mean, oh, you might be doing something wrong. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't print out your document, right? If I write my last name in Microsoft Word, it freaks out. But I can still print it, and it's OK. So if we look at these red squigglies, we see read-only does not exist in type property descriptor. OK. Let's take a look at what that actually means. So we look at define property and what's in a property descriptor. OK, I don't see read-only, but I see writable. So let's actually just switch that out. And we meant to write writable, and it corrects me, false, and that's great. Okay, next one is you can't give an HTML element to something that's a string. Now, this is a very common problem. GetElement.byId gives you an HTML element, and parseInt takes a string. Okay, so what I probably meant to do is get the content of that. So I'll get the text content, and this happens a lot when you're just kind of playing around with the DOM. And this one is actually just kind of, once you've seen the error, you're like, oh, you just hit yourself in the head. I forgot the extra bar, right? That's an arithmetic operator, not the or, the double bar. So, you know, now that we're in TypeScript, I can just add a quick type annotation. I can say that this is a string or a string array. And I immediately get this error. Oh, you can't for each on something that's a string or a string array? Well, why not? I just checked if I had a length, and then, oh, right. Length is on string and arrays. So what I better do is I better write array.isArray on email address. And now it works because TypeScript actually figures out, oh, that's a string array. That's just an array. And in the other branch, it can figure out that's just a string. No big deal. One last error. Trim is not a number. Well, I look at val. Val's a number. What's index then? Oh, index is a string, so I must have just swapped these parameters around. So, no big deal, right? TypeScript just helped us with a bunch of these errors, things that you probably would have just slipped you by in code review and saved you a ton of time. So that's great. I love TypeScript for this reason. It just helps me catch simple things and more complex things really quickly as I just type it along. Now, you might say, oh, but that's just a demo app, right? And so, I want to show you just how easy it is to move towards TypeScript if you have an existing code base. So I'm going to open up a quick to-do MVC project written in Angular 1 and JavaScript. And I just want to show you what this is. Just if you're not aware, to-do MVC is just a simple to-do app. And so, a little hard to read on the screen, but by the way, can everyone read this? Is everyone good? A little bigger? I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry about that. I apologize. Better? Okay, great. So if we look through this JS example, I'm seeing that this is a pretty standard Angular 1 app. The only thing that I find interesting is that the person who wrote this captured the value of this with TC just to avoid this orphaning. So that was an interesting little pattern. So I just want to show you how easy it is to move over to a TypeScript code base. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy over the JS folder. I'm going to rename it to source, because I need a different place for my input files. And actually I feel, well, let's just remember what this JS file looks like for a moment, right? Now I'm just going to delete the JS folder, because I feel pretty confident about what I'm going to do. And that's a famous last words in a presentation that you might give. So, uh-oh. Of course. Continue. User account control. Okay, yes. Get rid of that. Awesome. Okay. Now it's getting all the click events that I had earlier. Okay. And don't worry. These things happen. We are resilient in the face of computers. So I'm going to create a new file called tsconfig.json. All this is an options file for TypeScript, for when you're editing, when you're writing code, when you're using it with a compiler with it. And I'm going to add two options. So I'm going to add compiler options. Okay, usually I get completion, so I'm just going to reload the editor. No big deal. The background, I'm actually just going to open up the next one. Okay. Okay, compiler options. Okay, I'm just going to keep writing. So, first compiler option I want to use is the outer option. And with outer, that's just saying I want my input files to be mapped out to this specific folder. So I'm going to just output to the old JS folder. Next thing I want to do is allow JS, which is going to just allow me to use JavaScript as input files, which is great if you have an existing JavaScript project. So I'm just going to set that to true. Now, lastly, I'm just going to add some excludes. So excludes, and we're just going to set that to an array of node modules, because you usually don't want to get outputs of your node modules. And finally, the inputs. We don't want our outputs. We don't want our outputs to be used as inputs, right? And so I'm just going to start, so cd into to-do MVC, start tsc in watch mode, right? As that just spins up, we're going to go back into here, and we're going to look at we're going to look at the controller again. So first thing I'm going to do is take a look at, what's going on here exactly? tsc in watch mode. Good tooling. Thanks, TypeScript. Okay, I meant exclude, not excludes. Okay. So we'll put that in watch mode. And if we look here, compilation's complete. We look at the JS folder, we look at our controllers again, and my input looks basically the same as my output. If we just take a quick look here, it's basically more or less readable with just the spacing a little bit changed up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch this to TS again. off the bat, you're going to see red squigglies on Angular. And basically what that's saying, TypeScript is just saying, hey, I don't know if you misspelled something, so can you make sure that that actually is what you meant to type? And so we'll just say, hey, chill TypeScript, I actually did mean to write Angular. So we'll just say Angular exists, and usually we'd get the full-fledged type definitions for this, but here I'm just going to say it's of type any. With type any, I can do anything I want with it. And if we look at TC, it has the type any, which isn't very satisfying. I actually want that to be a little bit more strongly typed because it'll allow me to do some nice analysis throughout my applications. I'll write a my to-do control interface. And so I'll say that TC is of type my to-do control. And you see more red squigglies, and that's, again, just TypeScript saying, I don't know if these exist, so can you please make sure that's what you meant to write? So I'll just write to-dos, and I'll write escape key, and if I don't specify a type, to-dos is just of type any, but I can also say that these have specific types. And I've actually gone through and done this for all of us here today. I've created a file, to-do control DTS, and that has the interface and description of my controller. And so let's go back to the TypeScript file, and let's use that as the type here, if it'll double-click. And now that I've done that, one of the cool things is that as I go along, I start to see types flow throughout my program. And so if I hover over to-do, I see it's of type to-do. And if I hover over index, I see it's a number. And so I can write to-do dot completed or to-do dot title, and it gives me nice suggestions. Now, the reason that you would do this is, one, you'd get really nice tooling and nice error catching, and that's terrific. But if you're also just thinking about moving over to an Angular 2 app from an Angular 1 app, the first step towards doing this stuff is to actually move your code over to TypeScript. And that's because you'll actually start flushing out the types and describing the contracts between different parts of your program. So I strongly suggest looking into this. It's actually a very easy thing to do. Next thing, I want to just open up an ng-Reddit app. Code ng-Reddit. And basically, internet's not working so great for me right now, but I'll show you basically what this app does. It just grabs results from reddit.com and just displays the links, just kind of like any subreddit would. And so it's really simple. As soon as we get our JSON object, we actually just use what's called a type assertion to just say, hey, I know what the shape of this thing is. Now, if you look at what you get back from Reddit, you get this really big blob of data, and you get things that you might not necessarily care about, like if it's edited, or the link flare CSS class, or like things like that. You really just don't care that much. But when I defined the shape of this, I only needed to define as much as I cared about. And I just wrote out the type. And then, as I went along, I could get some nice tooling. Like, as I type along, I can confidently say this has a data, which has a children, which I can map on. And then everything I map on, I get a data field as well. And if you look at the JavaScript experience, it's very fuzzy, and you don't necessarily know if you have the things that you have. So going back to presentation view and hugs, and so things that are coming up for TypeScript 2.0 are I'm really excited about, to be honest. Obviously I'm honest about that. Async await is going to be phenomenal. If you write a lot of test code or any sort of asynchronous code, this saves you from having to invert the logic of your programs by putting them in callbacks and promises. And so you don't have to worry about that sort of stuff. We're also getting read-only properties, getting the ability to type this in functions, which allows you to migrate your JavaScript code or just write TypeScript code the way you want a lot more easily. We've got path mapping, which is going to make JSPM use a lot easier. Some other really nice static analysis stuff. One of the best things that's coming is an improved typing acquisition story. So we're moving away from a model of using an external tool like TSD or typings. We want to just use the existing infrastructure that you get today. So for instance, you're already using NPM or something like it to manage all of your dependencies for your code. So why not just move towards that model for your DTS files? And that's what we have been thinking. And so in the coming months, you're going to be able to see, or in our nightlies, you'll be able to just play around with this soon and just see how this works out. So I'm really excited about that. Another thing is nullable and non-nullable types. Now, null has been called the billion-dollar mistake by its creator. And in JavaScript, we have null and undefined. And so, simple math, that's a $2 billion mistake. So let's gain our losses back, right? By default, null and undefined are in each of your domains. You have number, in number you have null and undefined, in string you have null and undefined, and that makes things harder because you have more edge cases to think of. So let's nix that, right? We're adding a mode where you can just think of a null and undefined as having their own types. And with that, the same way that you might describe something that's a number or string as number or string with a union type, you would say, I have number or undefined. So I think that's really great. I would love if you all gave it a shot. We have nightlies, and if you'd like, keep in touch. We're on GitHub. Just leave us an issue or a suggestion or anything like that. Ping us on Twitter, tweet us on Twitter, sorry. Gitter us on Gitter. I'm listening to a ton of stuff on our Gitter chat room, and you can find example code for all of this on this repo up here. And thank you all so much for your time today. I really appreciate you all having me at ng-conf today. Thank you to the hosts. It's been phenomenal. So, thank you.